This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Hello, and welcome to Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network powered by Raven International. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, the Dream Coach. This is a show where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams, and how you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love and rediscover the truth of who you really are. Every week, I've been presenting guests who talk about all kinds of ways you can empower yourself, improve your self-image and self-awareness, and prepare you for the possibilities of going anywhere you want in life. But what do you do when, say, you're ready to change careers or go out for a job when you've been out of the workforce for a while? You may have all the self-confidence in the world, but how do you market yourself? What do you need to get that interview? And what do you say to convince a potential employer that you're the right person for them? So today's program is devoted to helping you develop the practical strategies you need for success. We're going to get this advice from my guest, Brad Pollak. Brad is a career development coach who specializes in leadership and marketing strategies and helps college students plan their own pathways to success. Welcome to Dream Power Radio, Brad.
Thank you, Debbie. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. Very excited.
Well, I'm excited to get into this particular issue, but let's start with the basics and tell me about what it is you do. What is a career development coach?
I call myself a career development coach compared to, say, a career coach. I think of career coaches as individuals who plan careers for the clients that they have. Maybe you should try this, maybe you'd be good at that, and so on and so forth. And they're very, very important. Career coaches are very, very important. My focus is more on the development of your story as you go down the road to pursue different possibilities, or very specifically, if you're pursuing an actual job or an internship. And that's why the word development is a really important part of what I do. I think career development and career coaching, it's sort of used interchangeably, but I put development in there because I want to be very specific with everybody that I'm focused on really the story part and helping you develop your interviewing skills, your job search skills and such in the developmental way. So that's why it's career development coach.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about this whole concept of storytelling. What do you mean? It's not like you're making up a story, because you are talking about yourself and apparently what you actually do. So tell me how storytelling fits into a job search.
It's always driven me crazy to meet folks who are really qualified to do any number of jobs, to do all kinds of work, and find that they fall short in the interview and therefore aren't offered the opportunity, not because they're not qualified, but because they're just not comfortable telling their story. And I started to sort of focus on this about 10 years ago, because I was trying to figure out why are some of these really talented people not landing the jobs that they're looking for, because I know that they're qualified. And it became more and more apparent to me that the way that they were sort of rolling out their narrative, I define a story as a narrative with a beginning, a middle, and an end. We all know that that's what a story is. And what surfaced as I continued to talk with lots of people was, I think many of us take it for granted that the folks we're talking to know our story. They take it for granted that their own network of trusted family members, trusted friends, trusted colleagues, prospective employers know their narrative, when in fact they don't. So the story part, as far as I'm concerned, that's the fundamental building block of the job search process. If you are comfortable delivering a narrative that really does explain your situation at present, at this particular point in your life, it opens up all kinds of possibilities for you. And the great thing about taking the time to pull your story together is, first of all, in the pulling together of your story, the beginning, the middle, and the end, that helps you become more confident when push comes to shove and you're sitting across the table from somebody who says to you, so tell me about yourself, or why should we hire you? Or why do you want to work here? If you've taken the time to put this narrative together, and it doesn't need to be perfect. It's not like it has to be Shakespeare, but a narrative that you are comfortable with a beginning, middle, and an end, it just boosts your confidence so that when you're in the actual game of interviewing, it's almost like you've already answered the questions. And the other thing, so it boosts your own confidence. But the other thing that's great about putting your narrative together, your story, is your network now has more clarity about what your situation is. And I'm generalizing, but I think that even those who are closest to us don't necessarily know what we are aspiring to do, or even what some of our skill sets are. I mean, I know people who work at all kinds of different companies and organizations, but honestly, I couldn't tell you I know exactly what they do. I couldn't tell you really specifically what their strengths are, what their aspirations are. For me to then spread the word about somebody and be an evangelist and wave a flag on behalf of a potential candidate, if I know the story, I can do a better job helping spread the word about that individual. So it works in two ways. One, it helps me get confident in the job search by putting my story together. And the other is it helps my network help me spread the word. One of the things that I tell all the students I teach is that if they were to interview, if they were to just ask their friends and say, I know that you know more or less what I'm doing, but do you know what I'm studying? Do you know what I am thinking of doing and why I'm thinking of doing it? Their friends won't be able to answer that question. So it's about adding clarity, building confidence, and then increasing the chances of opening doors of opportunity for yourself. I think the story is everything, absolutely everything. And it could be for a college student, high school student, or a seasoned professional. Taking the time to pull together your narrative is really, and of course the narrative changes as we go through life. So that's why I love the story.
So what makes a story effective? I mean, when you're wanting to present yourself in your best light, how do you know what things to emphasize and maybe what things to maybe leave out?
That's a key part of the whole exercise. I think there are two types of stories. One is the story that you tell to, let's say, get the interview. And then the other story is the story that you tell during the interview. So you want to get the interview for sure. And then you want to be able to tell perhaps a slightly more robust story during the interview. So to get the interview, you're really putting together an elevator pitch. I just refer to it as a short narrative. And it has 3 steps. One is you introduce yourself and you explain your current situation. And it always amazes me how sometimes students can trip over themselves just in describing what they're studying and what they're doing and where they're going to college. And just that introduction can be challenging, not because they don't know who they are or what they're doing, but just it's the act of telling it out loud and saying it and delivering it. So this is the first step is you want to introduce yourself and explain your current situation. So let's suppose I'm studying automotive technology. And I might say, my name's Brad Pollak, and I'm in the automotive technology program at Citrus College. It's a great program. It's taught by ASE certified master technicians, and I'll receive my certificate of achievement in June of this year. That little intro right there, it tells everything succinctly. This is my name. This is what I'm studying. This is what I'm doing right now. And this is what I aspire to achieve by a certain date. So I've introduced myself. Then the second step out of the story, let's say the middle, this is where you talk about what you'd like to do ideally, or what you're thinking that you'd like to do ideally. It doesn't have to be anything certain, but let's just say ideally you'd like to do something. Maybe, again, on the auto tech side, I'd like to be an auto tech at a dealership, Toyota dealership, Ford dealership, whatever the case might be. So rather than just say, I'm looking for a gig as an auto tech at a dealership, to make your story have more of an impact, maybe give a little bit of background. All my life, I've always been great at doing anything mechanically with my hands. And that's why I want to be an auto tech. I interned at a couple of dealerships. I've really enjoyed the training that they offer. the environment. And so I want to find a job as an auto tech at a dealership in Southern California or Montpelier, Vermont, or wherever the case might be. So that right there adds more juice, more understanding to the person who is listening to the story. And then the final part, which is to me, in many ways, the most important part for anybody who's sort of delivering an elevator pitch, is what I refer to as your inner core. This is what interviewers, hiring managers, this is what they really want to know. But because of everybody's political correctness and so on and so forth, the questioning can be a little bit safe. So I say, don't wait to be asked if you're a hard worker, or if you have great interpersonal skills, or if you have great analytical skills, or if you have great management skills. Just roll it out. So now the automotive technology student might say, I'm a hardworking, driven person. I care about the work that I do. I care about the people I work with. And I have a strong desire to continue learning. So those 3 steps: introduce yourself, explain your current situation, describe what you'd like to do ideally, and then describe a little bit of your inner core. Inner core really is like your principles. And principles, as we all know, those are the guidelines of human behavior that have been proven to be valuable, right? We all have principles. But in the spur of the moment, if somebody were to say to you, tell me some of your principles, most of us wouldn't be able to do it. We have principles. We know we have principles. We know what some of our principles are. But my whole point is prepare ahead of time. So then you have a fluid narrative. You've introduced yourself. You've described what you'd like to do ideally, and you've described a little bit about what goes on inside. And when you take the time to pull that together, it absolutely adds clarity to your roadmap and boosts your confidence enormously. I mean, we all need to be confident. It doesn't matter what stage of life we're in. When we're interviewing, which I think is an unnatural act in the first place, we want to be confident. And having sort of prepared the story beforehand is important. So that's the elevator pitch. And that can be used by a seasoned professional or a seasoned individual, or somebody who's just out of high school. It's across the board. And then, so once you're sort of in the interview and somebody were to say, so tell me about yourself, then you can go into more depth, depending on how much time you think you have in the interview and such. I call it a canvas pitch, where I believe that we, as we are talking with hiring managers, owners, et cetera, I think we should think of ourselves as painters, where we're painting a blank canvas. Let's just picture in our minds, we have a blank white canvas. And we start at the lower left corner and we paint across the canvas diagonally until we get to the top right-hand corner. We're painting, and there's layer after layer after layer. Maybe let's say 3 layers. Maybe the first layer is just going over where you grew up, where you went to high school. Maybe the second layer is what did you do after high school? Maybe before you started working, you weren't sure if you were going to go to college, whatever that post-high school reality is. And then the third layer, and for the more seasoned person, that's going to be the main focus. The third layer is what have you been doing after you graduated high school or after you completed the military? So those 3 layers are important to practice, because some candidates might think, well, I'm 65 years old. Why do I need to tell somebody where I went to high school, or that I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona and played football? Well, I'll tell you why. Because that's actually what the hiring manager wants to know. Tell me about you. I want to hear about you as the person, as the human being that you are. Well, I grew up in Phoenix. I had a good experience, a tight-knit family, and I went to high school in Tempe, and then went to ASU and really enjoyed it there. So now here I've set the ground, the fundamentals in terms of telling my canvas pitch. Now the hiring manager knows, okay, got it. I'm developing a picture in my mind of what this individual's life has been like. Then at ASU, I had a really great business professor who encouraged me to really dive into the world of real estate, which I'd never really thought about. And he introduced me to a real estate developer who introduced me to the world of real estate. And then I started interning for that gentleman, and then was offered a full-time position. And then I had that position for a couple of years and realized I needed to know more about finance, and decided to go back to school and get my MBA. So now, as I'm telling the story, I'm painting this canvas. And I'm making it so the roadmap is clear to the hiring manager. And as I'm telling the story, it's opening up what I'm like as a human being, because the hiring manager is looking at me wondering what is it going to be like to work with Brad as a person. And so the development and the delivery of the story gives the hiring manager a little bit of a better view in the context of a job interview than otherwise, right? So then I can continue telling my story about how I then moved to Los Angeles and went to UCLA to get my MBA. And then from there, I was at UCLA and I was walking down the hall one day and I saw MBAs needed in Latin America. Who knew? I pulled the number off the piece of paper in the hallway of the business school and found that the Ford Foundation was sponsoring MBAs for 1 or 2 years in Latin America. I thought, wow, this is great. I've been down to Mexico a few times. So then I applied. I was offered the opportunity. And next thing I knew, I was working for the Banco Nacional in the real estate area in Mexico City. Did that for 4. Boom. Now that's sort of starting to make sense. This is how I got to Mexico versus I could have just said, yeah, I've lived in Mexico a few years and I know the banking system. I want to add some humanity to the whole story, to the whole picture.
It sounds like when you add the specifics, it makes you more attractive when they know more.
It does. And we think, you're right, Debbie, you're right. It does. And we sometimes think, maybe more than sometimes think, well, I'm not going to add the specifics because it's going to be boring or they're not going to want to know that. And I disagree wholeheartedly. They do want to know if you keep it going. And
specifics, we need to do a specific break here. So we are talking about careers and developing our careers with Brad Pollak, and we'll be right back. What do Thomas Jefferson, Elias Howe, and Paul McCartney have in common? They all understood the value of dreams, and as a result, the ideas, inventions, and creations from their dreams affect us to this day. What great ideas are you leaving on your pillow at night? Sign up for a complimentary consultation at my website, thedreamcoach.net, and discover why your dreams are a terrible thing to waste.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Yes, welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, and we're talking about careers with Brad Pollak. Brad, you were telling us all about, before the break, you're telling us all about the role of the story and its importance and everything. But let's present this scenario. What about people who have been out of the workforce for a while? So there's a gap in their work experience, but they want to get back to work. They've had skills that have been marketable in the past. How do they craft their story so it makes them attractive to an employer?
Everybody has a story. And even if you've been out of the workforce for a long time, you still have a story. The important thing is to focus on the truth of your story and to think through carefully what sorts of things you have done. And I would say that for someone who's been out of the workforce a long time, maybe it's a parent who's been a full-time parent at home and the kids are now out of the house or school or what have you. And that doesn't mean for the last 18 years or 20 years or however many years it's been that there haven't been incredibly important experiences in that parent's life. So you have to, just like you sit down to pull your story together, if you're just starting out in the workforce or if you're a seasoned professional, you want to think through, all right, what is my current situation? And then you want to think about what is it you're at least contemplating doing ideally. And the reason I say ideally is why not be idealistic? Why not? And then what are some of your principles and other qualities that make you who you are? But when we get back into the workplace, or actually even if we're just continuing in the workforce, I think that we need to consider ourselves problem solvers. So let's suppose somebody is posting, an employer has a job, has posted the position. Immediately what that signifies to me is the employer has a problem. The problem is she needs to fill that position. That's the problem the employer has. So we as candidates are problem solvers. We're going to respond to that posting because for whatever reason, we find that we have the qualifications in some capacity to do that job. And therefore we think we are focusing on the fact that if we apply for that job, we're going to be able to solve this employer's problem. So the key thing to figure out is what kinds of problems, if you haven't been in the workforce for a long time, what kinds of problems are you able to solve and have you been able to solve all along the way over the last, let's say, couple of decades? And sometimes all the stuff that you've been able to resolve, maybe you are a very active parent and you've been involved in the PTA and you've been involved as a volunteer in your community and you've had to deal with all kinds of parenting issues. All of these things that become part of our day-to-day lives as parents, they might not necessarily be thought of as quote unquote skills when in fact they are. So I think the first step is to take a deep breath, look back over the last 20 years, write down on a piece of paper, what are some of the problems that I have solved as a parent, as a member of the community, as a friend? What are some of the interests that I've developed over the last 20 years, whether it's with technology or some sort of a topic that I'd like to study more about in college or wherever I would study. And the picture starts to develop in front of you of, all right, these are the problems that I like to solve. These are the problems that I know how to solve. These are the types of things that I would like to do ideally. And maybe what that means is I'm going to have to go back to school and learn a few things, learn a few skill sets to be able to be the real problem solver that I want to present myself as when I'm looking for work. But the key thing is no one who's been out of the workforce for however many years it's been should think, I don't have skills. I don't have the ability to solve problems. I don't have what's needed in today's day and age. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. And I think that we sometimes get a little bit overwhelmed by, let's say, technology. I've been out of the workforce for a while, for a long time, perhaps. I'm not up with technology. I think that the technology part of things, I think it's overblown, meaning I don't know how to do this technological thing or that technological thing, and therefore I'm not competitive in the marketplace. But that might not be the problem solving that is needed by the employer. You might be an incredibly organized, analytical, critical thinker with great management skills, not because you've been the manager on a resume, but because you've been managing, on the parenting side of things in school and your community. You might have those, let's just call them soft skills, that are absolutely categorically 100% needed. And then if you also need to know certain technologies, well, the soft skills, those are the ones that are important. And if you also need to know Microsoft Office, or you need to know some other form of social media platform, you can learn those things far easier than it would take to learn these soft skills that you've developed for a long time. So you need to be really honest with yourself about the types of problems that you have been solving for the last however long it's been. You need to be honest with yourself about what you like about solving some of those problems and what you don't like. And you need to be honest with yourself about what you might need to learn. But the experience of life that you bring with you to that job is gold. It's absolutely gold. So that's how I would approach it if I'm coming back into the workplace.
Yeah.
And then you put your...
I was going to say, that brings me back to really a point that I stress so much on this program, which is all about self-awareness. Many people don't even take the time to really understand their qualities, their good qualities or bad qualities or whatever. And taking that time makes all the difference in the world. And even more so when you are looking for employment for some sort of financial benefit for doing it.
Yeah, there's every need in the world for somebody who is passionate about what he or she believes in. The problem is that, or the challenge is for we as candidates, it's up to us to make it clear to the employer to the hiring manager that we are going to be able to change that person's or solve that person's problem. I always think of Zig Ziglar. You familiar with Zig Ziglar?
Yeah.
I wish I could have had the opportunity to meet that gentleman. One of the great motivational speakers, sales trainers, just incredible guy. And he tells a story in one of his many broadcasts of how one day he was jogging. He jogged every day, I guess. And he's completing the first loop past his house. And he sees his wife in the driveway with a young man. And his wife beckons him over. So he stops his run. And his wife says, Zig, this is Tom. Tom, this is my husband, Zig. And Tom's this maybe 21 or 22-year-old young man. And Tom says to Zig, Mr. Ziegler, my name is Tom Smith, and I am a pool professional. And I'm in the neighborhood introducing myself to pool owners like yourselves, you and Mrs. Ziegler. And Mr. Ziegler, are you the kind of pool owner who would like to be able to clean your pool in half the time it currently takes you, using half the chemicals you use currently, and have it all be done without your having to be involved in the process? Are you that kind of pool owner, Mr. Ziegler? So Ziegler is telling the story to his audience. And he says to his audience, well, what am I going to say to Tom? No, I'm not that kind of pool owner. Of course I'm that kind of pool owner. And within 20 or so minutes, Tom sells Zig Ziglar, who himself is arguably the greatest salesperson of the 20th century, a pool cleaner. And the reason I love that story, and the reason I think Zig told it, is this young man knew the problem before he even asked the question. He identified the problem and then explained how he would solve the problem. But Zig Ziglar, admitted that he had the problem. And here's the young man with the solution. And so I translate that into how we present ourselves in the job search world, which is, especially if we're more sophisticated and we are further along in life, et cetera, it's our responsibility to identify, to the degree that we can, what the problems are that an employer faces, and to be able to ask questions and say, are you the type of employer that would like to be able to manage your team of customer service reps in a way that would have it be done seamlessly by somebody who understands how to move people, motivate people, guide people, educate people, train people without your having to be involved or having to learn, having to worry about that training being done? Are you that kind of owner, Ms. Jones? This is the approach. Problem solving opens many doors. And then also, I realize not everybody goes into a job interview understanding what all the different problems are, but to the degree that you can at least guesstimate what some of these problems are, you want to think of yourself as the problem solver. So how would you tell this employer how you are going to solve their problem? So I just love that story.
That is wonderful. Well, Brad, there's so many more questions I have for you, but we're just about out of time. My final question, though, is how can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, I have a website. I'm at bradpollak.com, or you can email me at brad@bradpollak.com. I on the career development side of things, I teach students from all disciplines. And because of what's happening now with Zoom being basically the fundamental building block of our lives, and I can teach students anywhere in the world, really. And I just love it because I love helping build confidence and helping students and anybody understand, look, we all have an important story to tell. Each of us has an incredibly important story to tell. It's just up to us to sort of do the best that we can to put it together and deliver it so we can open doors of opportunity for ourselves.
Wonderful. Brad, thank you so much for being on Dream Power Radio today.
Debbie, thank you for the opportunity.
We've been speaking with career development coach Brad Pollak. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. If you have, please tell all your friends, follow me, and drop a positive review on your podcast site. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector-Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International.